Today's guest, Ingrid, hails from St Lucia, a lush Caribbean island known for its volcanic peaks, vibrant Creole culture, and status as the only country named after a woman. With a population of around 180,000, St Lucia blends African, French and British influences, and though its official language is English, many also speak St Lucian Creole. Ingrid trained as a physician in Cuba for 7 years on a St Lucian government scholarship and later worked in pediatrics and then went on to work in various public health and policy roles across the Caribbean. She made a big move when she studied her master's degree in Adelaide, where she also met her partner, but it was the appeal of small city life that drew her to Hobart to do her Ph.D. Now based at the Menzies Institute, she's heavily involved in health economics research and has found a second home in Tasmania, one that perhaps surprisingly shares much with her Caribbean island roots.
Like growing up as a child, during the week you go to school and on Sundays it's just the beach. Because the beach is like 5-10 minutes from anywhere you live. So it's a very relaxed environment and it's very community oriented. So families are very intertwined. Most of my dad's family lives in the UK because after the World War, a lot of people from the colonies migrated to the UK to rebuild London after all of the bombings. But like my mom's family, basically, I grew up with them. So growing up as a child, during the holidays, if I didn't visit my grandparents in the UK, basically it would be going to the countryside to my mother's mother, and it would be all of the grandkids there, and we'd just be like roaming in the bush, roaming in the river, and that sort of stuff. It was a really nice childhood, free of crime and fear and that sort of thing that you have to keep watching over your kids. And so I grew up in a really good situation. Back home, my family was really education oriented. So yeah, you have to do well at school. And I guess it's because my grandmother's generation never really got the chance to go to school. And my grandmother kind of enforced that her kids had to go to school, and then my parents kind of. So it was really education oriented and always encouraged you to excel and that sort of thing. So that was more or less the kind of environment. But it was sort of like the whole village raised the child. So you taught to respect your neighbors, respect everybody. So it's a very respectful society. It's not very much like that anymore. I think we've become very Americanized because that's like a lot of the influence in the Caribbean is based on what's happening in the US. So a lot of the culture has sort of changed and it's not as safe as it was before. So it's a very different life now. But I think when I grew up at the really opportune time. Yeah. So I really enjoyed my childhood.
And what did your parents do?
My mom was a teacher and my dad was a salesman. So yeah, my mom taught at secondary school for most of her life. And when she moved to the US, she does special ed. She was doing special ed. They're retired now. So they spent some time in the US, maybe mainly because of the better healthcare system than home. And they spend time at home as well. So right now they're home for the 3 months that they usually spend at home, because it's too hot in the summer for them to be up there. So they rather go home where it's cooler.
And so you mentioned that your parents really sort of pushed the doing well at school and all that kind of thing. So were you a good student?
I think I was an average student.
Okay.
But yeah, they really kind of like, this is what's going to make your life, give you opportunities in life. I mean, like now I think kids have like so many different options. But back then, for you to kind of like make a good salary at home, you had to have a good education, which it's not necessarily the situation now. You know, there's so many different things you can do with skills, construction, IT, all those different things that you don't necessarily need an education for. But yeah, they always pushed education. So I was an eternal student. Yeah. And when I finished my PhD, it was like, okay, I think you've done enough school.
And what were the opportunities at that time if you got a good education?
So the traditional opportunities, like being a lawyer, being a doctor, engineer, those sorts of careers, which were not so much varied at that time. Yeah, so I just chose like a traditional career, so I became a physician, and I liked it, but I thought it took too much of my time, and I didn't really like the quality of life of spending my whole life in the hospital. So I kind of like diverted and went into public health and health economics, and that's where I am now.
And so when you were at school, was that what you wanted to do, or was that just something that you kind of was one of a few options?
I think it was, I can't even tell if it was something I wanted to do or because that's how society was structured, that those were the options that you had, you know. I think I just kind of like did it. And it's not that I didn't like it, I really enjoyed it, but I just think the quality of life was not ideal.
And so where did you study to be a physician?
I studied in Cuba.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm fluent in Spanish. I lived there for 7 years. Yeah, I lived there for 7 years. It was quite interesting. It's a really lovely country with rich history, and I really appreciate the time that I spent there because I think it really built my personality.
Mm-hmm,
Yeah.
And it's known for its health system, isn't it?
Yeah, it's known for the health system. They have a socialized medicine, and they focus on two main things, education and health.
And what would you say was the biggest thing you learned from that experience?
To be flexible. And as you said earlier, everything doesn't go as planned. And I think I learned to be very humble and learn to live on very little. Like, you really don't need a lot of luxuries in life to be happy. I just learned to appreciate a lot of little things, and like now I live a very simplistic life. I lived in, like before I moved back here, I had moved and lived in 5 different countries and always had to like pack up and stuff like that. So I just learned to live with very little. So when I'm packing up, I just pack my clothes and I don't build attachments to anything. So I think it kind of taught me to be simplistic, and like life is more about experiences and people and less about things.
And did you get a scholarship to study?
Yeah, I got a scholarship to study through the government back in St Lucia. They had some agreement with the Cuban government at that time. So yeah, that's how I ended up studying there, which I think was a good thing. I can't explain Cuba, but I think from living in a capitalist country where you make all of your choices to going into a system where choices are made for you was quite difficult. Because I grew up in a family where you were allowed to, as a female, my family was very female dominated and strong female personalities, like my grandmother and my aunts and stuff like that. So like I always had like a strong personality about making my decisions and things, choosing things that I do. And when I went there, it was things are chosen for you and this is what you need to follow. So that was kind of hard in the beginning, but then afterwards you just learn to kind of like go with the flow and be flexible and know that things are temporary. Yeah, so it was hard at the beginning, but
you adjusted.
You have to. You're a human being. So St Lucia and Jamaica are known as countries where you have the most female CEOs and leaders. I think the way the Caribbean is structured, because there's like a lot of single parents or families where females are in charge, you kind of have more equality in the society. I mean, you still have the same male entitlement, because that I think that is sort of genetic, and maybe I actually think it's genetic because, like, I mean, in the animal world, male animals dominate. So I think that's kind of genetic for males. But like back home, there are a lot of female leaders, a lot of teachers who would have taught me at school were females. So they kind of give you that confidence that as a female, you can do whatever you want. However, when I went to work in the hospital, it was very male dominated. But I kind of learned that this is how society is built, but you can always weasel yourself through by showing people that you can do, you have abilities to do the same thing that they can. So I think it was hard at the beginning to kind of like enter that world, and it's like, okay, it's men in charge at the hospital. And I worked on the pediatric service, and I was the only female. But then I actually worked with nice men. who kind of enabled me, pushed me ahead, and that sort of stuff. I guess because the other thing is that men are not usually threatened by women. So they kind of feel like, okay, you're not going to be in charge of them. So there's no reason to keep you down. Whereas I think it's kind of different where women, we constantly compete with each other. So if you have a female boss, it may be harder for you to deal with a female boss than a male boss as a woman. So usually when you get a scholarship from the government, you're usually bonded to work with them for the period of time the scholarship. So my scholarship was 7 years, so I was bonded to work with them for 7 years. And I didn't mind doing that because I felt like I went to train as a doctor so I could help people in my country. And I quite enjoyed working there. But like I said, the hours were just too long. And so, yeah, I worked there for about 7 years. And then I moved to Guyana to to work in a different type of job.
And so when you in the hospital, what your main focus was?
Pediatrics and neonatology. Yep.
Yeah.
So I worked in the neonatal intensive care unit with premature babies and sick babies. Yeah.
Yep. And that was busy by the sounds of it.
That was very busy, full on. So I ended up going to Guyana because whilst I was working in pediatrics, that was at a point in time when HIV became a thing back home. And we started having babies whose mums were infected with HIV. And that kind of like drove me into more of the public health aspects of infectious disease and that sort of stuff. And I went to some conference or meeting and I ended up having a chat with a gentleman who at that time was like the director of a unit that kind of managed the whole HIV response in the region. And he was like, oh, we're going to be advertising a job. Why don't you apply for it? And I was like, okay. So I applied for it just out of like curiosity. How would I perform at an interview or that sort of stuff? And then I got a call to say that I actually got the job. And I was like, okay, I'll just go for it. And that's how I ended up in Guyana. I stayed there for 4.5 years in that job before moving to Jamaica for another job.
And so how did that differ from your previous role?
So that one was completely non-clinical. So it was more about managing clinical guidelines for how people manage HIV in the region, kind of like standardizing what everybody did in all the islands in the region. So it was more sort of like management and sort of like monitoring what other people, how people are actually managing HIV patients and standardizing guidelines and surveillance and that sort of stuff. So it was very different to what I was used to doing.
So it's
more policy and planning.
Did you feel that you were more suited to that kind of field?
Initially, no, but afterwards I kind of like thought that I could make more of a difference by influencing how policy was impacting patients. Because my thing was when I worked at the hospital, there were like so many resource constraints and so many things that patients couldn't access that I thought like, okay, if I work in the ministry, I can influence how the budget is planned and what policies they implement, and that will influence how patients access treatment. But I realized the higher I went, that wasn't the case, that there's just so much bureaucracy and nothing changes. So yeah, I ended up in research. I worked in Jamaica as well and worked in policy and planning as well. Then I came to Adelaide to do my master's and then went back and worked in Trinidad and did similar, policy and planning as well.
And what sort of motivated you to do further study and to study in Australia as well?
So when I was thinking about studying about health systems, I looked at good examples of health systems in the world, and what came up for me were the Nordic states, Sweden, Norway, Australia, and New Zealand. Those were the good examples of health systems. So I thought, okay, maybe not the Nordic states, but maybe Australia and New Zealand. And I got a scholarship to come to Australia. So I ended up in Adelaide with that scholarship, yeah.
And did you know much about Australia before you came?
Nope. I knew nothing about Australia apart from the fact that it would take me long to get there.
Yeah.
And maybe kangaroos and koalas and that sort of stuff. But I knew nothing about the culture or how people were or even the climate, which like most people think Australia is like hot all year round. They don't realize that Australia has the same kind of seasons as other places, like different parts of Australia, that is. Yeah, so yeah, I was just coming to unknown territory. Yeah, and I'm usually adventurous when it comes to that kind of thing, so I don't mind change. So I was like, okay, let's see how it goes.
How was your initial experience of Adelaide? Like, was there anything that was unexpected?
So the good thing about the scholarship that I got was that we had a month of orientation, and basically there was like a whole week where we just learned about Australia. So Australian slang and like different practices, like what happens in the summer and barbecues and all those different things, okay. And what to expect. Like Australian people are very casual and the way they speak to you, certain things that you might not be able to understand. And so we got like a really good orientation. So by the time we were released into the community, it wasn't too bad at all. Yeah, and Adelaide is sort of like a university city. Mm-hmm. So most people that you would meet probably are the university students as well. So it wasn't too hard adjusting. Like I find Australians quite relaxed, welcoming. They're just very easygoing people. Mm-hmm. And like I don't take a lot of things to mean anything. So when people ask me about like where I'm from, I don't take offense from it. I just tell them where I'm from, and then they ask questions. But I know some people, when you ask them where they're from, they take offense from it. But for me, that's different. And maybe it's because I've lived in different places. I think sometimes maybe you condition yourself to feel like there's a ulterior motive when somebody asks you that question. And I'm very slow when it comes to certain things, so I don't pick up on a lot of things. So like somebody will ask me where I'm from and I'll start like a whole conversation with them. And maybe it might be they're asking me where I'm from because it's from like, where are you from? You're not from here. Mm. Or it might be where are you from because I really want to know. And I usually think of where are you from because I really want to know. I never think of, I'm not a very negative person. And I'm very slow when it comes to those sorts of things. Yeah. But I think like I've never really experienced somebody asking me where I'm from because they want to make me feel like I know I'm not Tasmanian and I know I'm not Australian, but like I don't feel like there's any bad intention because a lot of times when you tell them, oh, I'm from the West Indies, they'll pick up cricket. Oh, cricket. And they'll start talking about the West Indies team and that sort of stuff. So like I think it's like your whole attitude. I'm not saying that people haven't had bad experiences. And I think it depends on where you live in Tasmania as well, because not everybody's open to people from outside of Tasmania, not even the mainland. Yeah. So I always tell people Tasmanians they're not racist. They just don't like people from anywhere else. That's all. It's not about you being from another country. It's about you not being from Tasmania because they're very community-based, they're very family-based, and they're very traditional.
I think maybe up in some parts of Tasmania, you're talking about people whose families have lived in the same place for 5-6 generations.
Yeah, they're very traditional, so it's like it's your outlook on things and how you perceive things. And if you're going to perceive it in a negative way, the negative stuff is going to come at you. Because most times when people ask me where I'm from, they think I'm going to tell them that I'm somewhere from Africa. And when I say the West Indies, it's like, oh, you're from the West Indies. You're from, I usually say West Indies because not everybody knows where St Lucia is. Yeah. And they're surprised that you're not from an African country, because of course I'm Black. So they expect me to be from a country in Africa. Of course we originated from there, but like, yeah, so I'm usually quite happy to tell people where I'm from. Basically, when I was coming back to Australia to do my PhD, I did not want to go to a big city. So Sydney and Melbourne were like off the list. And I wanted to go to somewhere either at Adelaide's level or less busy than Adelaide. And I was like, okay, maybe I should try Tasmania. I had never visited Tasmania when I was in Adelaide. And yeah, I just ended up here as a student. I tried at Menzies and got a really good supervisor. And yeah, that's how I ended up in Tasmania as a student.
And what did you know about Tasmania before you came?
Not much. That it was cold. That was about it.
Yeah.
I didn't know much. I had never, ever visited. I mean, when I was a student in Adelaide, I went to Sydney, I went to Melbourne, which are the main places that people mostly go, but I had never visited Tasmania. But I really love it here.
When did you come, actually?
2018. So I was in Adelaide from 2014 to 2016, and I met my partner there. And basically, we were traveling back and forth between Australia and, at that time I lived in Trinidad and Tobago because that's where I was working, and we realized that it wasn't cost effective, that somebody had to move, but because he's a GP it would have been more difficult for him to move. So I was like, okay, I wanted to do a PhD, so I might as well just see if I can just find a PhD program and then we'll figure it out somewhere along the line. And yeah, and we figured it out and I'm still here.
Yeah. What was the motivation about wanting to choose a smaller place? What was the thinking there?
Well, I'm from a small island. The population is about 180,000. So I really don't like big cities. I'm a homebody. I'm an introvert. So I can't take a lot of stimulation. And I think because Tasmania was an island, even though the climate is different to where I'm from, when I first came, what I liked about it was that people were very welcoming and friendly, and you passed on the street and people would say good morning or how are you going and that sort of stuff, which I never experienced in Adelaide. So I found it felt a lot like home.
Okay. Plus
the beaches. I mean, the water is cold, but the whole scenery, and where I'm from is, it's a volcanic island, so the mountains and everything, and the green and lush vegetation, it feels very much like where I'm from, except for the climate. It's much more community oriented. And then when I came, I lived in Bellerive, which right across from the Oval, and there's Parkrun. So I started volunteering at Parkrun, and then you just meet so many different people, and I had good neighbors, so you felt at home. So yeah, it's quite different to what you feel when you go to bigger cities in Australia. Yeah, it's more, everybody's isolated in the bigger cities. So I quite like the community kind of sense in Tasmania.
And so coming to Tasmania after Adelaide, what was there anything that was different about life here compared to what you
definitely. Tasmania is way different to Adelaide in terms of the way people live. Adelaide is more of, although it's not a big city, it's more city-like. For you to get that relaxed feel, you have to travel somewhere for you to get that. Whereas when you're in Hobart, you travel 20 minutes and you're in Richmond. Mm-hmm. And you feel like you're in a different part. You're not in the city anymore. So I feel like the lifestyle in Hobart is way less stressful. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're stressed at work because you have commitments at work. But once you leave work, you're in a relaxed environment because you live away from the stressful situation. And also there's like so many outdoor things for you to do that are not like going out at night and that sort of stuff, that I think they're much more relaxing, engaging, sort of like healthy lifestyle opportunities here in Hobart. Yeah, it's just like a really different feel. And the air quality is just so different. Like you can tell when you land in Hobart that you're in Hobart. The air is just so fresh, even though the water is quite cold. So to be honest, I've been into the water twice in the 8 years that I've lived here in a wetsuit. Can't get used to it. I go to the pool instead.
Yeah.
So the beaches are quite similar. So the white sand, extensive big beaches, the hills and the mountains are similar. Like I said, the people are quite similar in terms of the way people are quite welcoming, and you meet people on the street and they just talk to you and you never met them before, you know. The other thing, I was telling somebody that Tasmania is big, but it's not that big, because sometimes you walk the streets and you see the same people if you walk through Hobart, and then you realize how small it is. So I think all of those things make me feel like I'm at home, you know, because it's not an overwhelming society.
When you were first sort of settling here, was there anything that was challenging or that you had to maybe adjust to?
The weather, because I came midwinter.
Oh, okay.
I came in July of 2018. So I think it was mostly the weather and trying to understand why the houses don't have proper heating. Don't have proper heating. That one I just could not understand. The winter is quite cold, but the houses are just not built for winter.
And tell me, what had motivated you to do to study a PhD? Because it's quite a commitment, isn't it?
The main motivation, like I just pushed it forward because it was one of the ways that I could be with my partner. So I came across here mainly.
So is your partner Australian too?
Well, he's Australian, but from Botswana.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So he's.
So he came here.
Australian citizen.
Yeah. So he came here when he was 19. Yeah. He studied medicine at Uni Melbourne, and I met him when I was in Adelaide. He was in Canberra, so we used to travel back and forth, and thought traveling back and forth between Adelaide and Canberra would have worked traveling back and forth from the Caribbean to Australia.
Yeah.
But it was just too expensive. Yeah, so I came and did my PhD and finished and started working at Menzies, and I've been there ever since.
So how did the work at Menzies start?
So during my PhD, I started sort of like doing work aside of my PhD on separate projects. And after my PhD, I ended up getting 2 fellowships because of that work. I got a Menzies fellowship because I had kind of like excelled during my PhD, and then got a fellowship from the Lung Foundation Australia because I work mainly in respiratory medicine. And that paid for salary for 2 years for me. And subsequent to that, applying for projects, I'm able to pay for my salary as well, because that's how researchers work. If you don't have project funding, you don't have a salary. Mm-hmm. So I was quite fortunate to have a good supervisor and some good mentors at Menzies. And I think Menzies is a really nice place to work. 1, because it's very female oriented. Mm-hmm. And 2, because there are lots of nice people who motivate you and push you forward if you actually want to stay in research.
Yeah, and I mean the Menzies research, I mean it's quite famous worldwide for its research, isn't it?
Yeah.
And tell me about what's the area of research that you're involved in?
So my main field is health economics, and I focus a lot on respiratory diseases. So looking more at like the economic burden that respiratory diseases have in Australia and in Tasmania. So my Tasmanian project focuses mainly on lung cancer and improving access for people who have lung cancer. Tasmania kind of has one of the highest rates of lung cancer in Australia. However, most Tasmanians who get diagnosed with lung cancer are diagnosed quite late. And we're actually trying to find out why people are being diagnosed late. It could be because they're presenting late, but it could be because they don't have access to the right resources within the system, either because of socioeconomic level, remoteness, because they're rural, all different reasons. But the projects that I developed is kind of trying to find out how we can improve survival of people with lung cancer. Nationally, I work in an area called interstitial lung diseases, mm-hmm. which is sort of like a broad range of more than 40 different subtypes of interstitial lung disease. And I work with a group called the Center for Research Excellence for Pulmonary Fibrosis. And it's a research group that spans over several universities across several states in Australia. And our portion at University of Tasmania is looking at economic and health burden of interstitial lung diseases. So looking at the quality of life, how people live with the disease, look at how it influences like cost to the health system, how productive people are in terms of if it affects their productivity, their work life, their family life, all that sort of stuff. So that's more or less what I do. And I also do some work on prostate cancer as well.
Okay.
So my work spans over several disease areas, but my main area, about 80% of my work is in respiratory diseases. But I think in a developed country that we should not have inequity. I feel everybody, whether you make $1 or you make $1 million, you should have the exact access to all of the facilities that everybody has. And you shouldn't be deprived of some sort of special surgery because you're from a lower socioeconomic background. So I think like there's a lot of work to be done in Tasmania when it comes to things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because here, especially for people who've just arrived here, about the issue of getting a GP and registering as a new patient is a bit of an issue, especially if you're you're not near the city.
Yeah, because GPs are like gold. It's a rare commodity because it takes like 3 weeks for you to get a GP appointment, which really shouldn't happen because you're going to the GP because you have an issue at that time. Not in 3 weeks' time. You have the issue now,
Yeah.
So it's quite challenging. The health system, it uses a lot of resources and no government will ever be able to cover an ideal health system, but I still think that there are lots of improvements that we can help make the system better for Tasmanians.
And are there any, I suppose, sort of aspects of life in St Lucia that you miss or would like to bring over here, perhaps?
Yeah, so last week there was Carnival, and I was on Facebook looking at the pictures, and I was like, oh gosh, I wish I was there. So that was something like, I mean, I don't like dress in the costumes and go parading, but like there are lots of like parties and socializing, and like I'm not a big socializer, but that event every year, you kind of like commit to going out for 2 weeks straight and not sleeping much.
Okay.
So yeah, I was looking at the pictures and I was like, oh my God, I wish I was home. Yeah, and the food as well. I miss the food.
So what's typical of St Lucian food?
I don't know if I would call it typical, but like we have a lot of street food and a lot of seafood. So I found it was a little bit difficult to adjust to the seafood in Australia. So like the seafood here, we eat a lot of seafood, so that I kind of miss. And you could just get that by the side of the road. Like somebody would just have a grill by the side of the road, grilling fish or grilling lobster or something like that. And yeah, I kind of miss the friends I had. I mean, I still keep in touch with them. And when I go home, like I hang out with my friends and stuff like that. But yeah, it's just different. And I kind of miss, like, sometimes when I get really familiar with people, I go into my usual St. Lucian accent.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, sometimes with my partner, he doesn't understand what I say because, like, I'm so familiar with him that I'll just, like, not speak properly. And speak very quickly. So I kind of miss having to kind of, like, speak properly all the time and explain certain terminologies that I use that people won't necessarily understand because that's terminology from back home. But it's kind of funny. Sometimes he says things that he has learned from me.
Okay. So is there like a Creole spoken in St Lucia?
Yeah, we speak French Creole.
Okay.
So we have English is our official language, but because of our French colonization, I do speak French Creole, so I can read and understand French, but I don't speak French because the Creole is quite different too.
Yeah.
Yeah, because kind of like broken French mixed with some African words. They said, I don't know which words are African and which part of Africa the words are from.
Yeah.
And the way I speak Creole is different to the way my grandmother speaks Creole. So hers is
Okay.
very, very French.
Okay.
Mine is more the modern version,
Yeah.
mixed with English words as well.
Yeah.
Each island has carnival. So carnival kind of originated from sort of like the Catholic tradition. So it's usually celebrated like 2 days before Ash Wednesday, because then you go into Lent and then you can't listen to any music and you're supposed to be very solemn. So carnival was sort of like a celebration of the slaves' harvest. And then basically they had that big celebration, and then it was Lent because that's what the slave master says you were supposed to do during that period because they were very religious. So it just continued as a tradition. So it happens either February or March because it goes along with the Catholic calendar. But because of tourism, each island kind of changed theirs so that, so ours used to be in February, but now it's in July. So it doesn't compete with Trinidad Carnival.
Okay.
And then Jamaica has theirs in April, and then St. Vincent Barbados has theirs in August and that sort of stuff. So some people actually follow the carnivals.
There's a carnival circuit then.
Yeah, they just go from island to island for carnival to celebrate.
So is it like a street party then in St Lucia?
So usually it's launched maybe like a few months before the actual culmination of the last 2 days. And during that period, you would have things like calypso competitions or soca competitions. So these are like song competitions. And then you would have like Kiddies Carnival. And then you have like lots of parties. So every weekend you would have like lots of parties. And the last week of Carnival, there are like parties from the Monday until the Sunday. And then there's like an early morning street dancing in the street, which is called Juve, meaning opening of the day. So that starts at about 4 a.m. And you basically just go paint your body and walk around with paint and dance in the street until like 6 or 7 a.m. Then you go home, you get dressed into your costume, and then there's 2 days of parade in your costume on the street, dancing for hours in the sun.
Right.
So yeah, it's a lot of fun.
And is that the biggest sort of the biggest celebration you have in St Lucia?
Yeah, it's sort of like the biggest festival, but there's also like an annual jazz festival as well, which happens in May, Jazz and Music Festival. And Christmas is a big thing as well. So there's usually like a lot of people come home for Christmas, and it's usually a big thing back home as well.
So how's Christmas celebrated in St Lucia?
Christmas is celebrated with a lot of eating and a lot of going from house to house. So you'll start breakfast at one house, you'll have lunch at another house, you'll have dinner at another house. You go home, you sleep, and then it starts the following day again.
Okay.
And you just eat excessively for at least 2 weeks until New Year's.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Obviously, everywhere has their own typical Christmas foods. I imagine it's a bit different in St Lucia to what we have here.
I wouldn't say it's too different because we were colonized by the British, so a lot of our food is influenced by the British. So you'll have the usual turkey and ham.
Oh, okay.
We don't do the seafood at Christmas like in Australia because we eat seafood every day. But the turkey and the ham, and then other St. Lucian dishes. Our food it's Creole-like, but we still have a lot of things that we got from our colonizers, the British. So we have like the meat pies, like you have.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you have. We have meat pies. We have sausage rolls, and
Okay.
all those different things. Our food is not very different, although we have typical things like we eat as well. Because a lot of us, although we look Black, like my surname is Cox, that's definitely not an African surname.
Yeah.
So our heritage is very mixed. My mother's family's surname is French. So yeah, the Caribbean is a very strange place because it's a mixing pot of European culture as well as African culture. And then we've developed our own culture. So our food is very much European and some African. And because we had Chinese who migrated there and Indians who migrated there, like curry is part of our general diet as well, because after slavery was abolished, there were the Indians who came to work, and then the Chinese came to work, and the Indonesians came to work.
Okay.
So our food is very mixed. I think one of the things I've learned is that if you're going to make the choice to live in Tasmania, you have to make the choice to live in Tasmania, meaning you have to adjust and you have to kind of like normalize yourself with what society expects of you. I feel like when you choose to migrate for whatever reasons you're migrating for. And yes, you have your culture, and yes, you still keep the customs that you're used to, but you can't expect people to adjust to you because you're the minority.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest lessons I've learned.